Here's a real statistic that I've mentioned before. 42% of venture-funded startups fail specifically because they don't have enough sales. In other words, they all thought after taking their friends and potential customers that the market would be tremendous, they'd sell like crazy, but it didn't materialize. Here's the most common mistake entrepreneurs make in talking to customers, and that they pitch their product immediately. They say, hey, we're building this solution, and they describe the solution and all the features, and they ask, doesn't it sound like something you really want? Human nature is such that the listener will want to give you the answer that you expect to hear. They want to be polite. They want to say yes. They often respond with something like, oh, that sounds great. I'm sure people will buy it. These positive answers don't tell you what you need to hear, what you need to know. How big is the problem outlined? How much pain does it really cause? And how often? Is it worth solving in the scope of everything else that customer is doing? Will the potential customer take the time to understand the product, find the product, purchase the product, set the product up, use it regularly, love it, and tell the world about it? That's a big set of elements that people don't think about. They just ask people, would you like it? That's not really the answer you need, which is, will the world buy it, use it, and love it, and tell their friends? Without understanding all these things, you may be building a bridge to nowhere. You may build that product, go to market, get some customers using it, but not enough to get cash flow break even. It's far enough that investors will put in more funds, and there you are. Here are some best practices to follow when conducting customer conversations. First, try to meet in person and take the time with the person you're talking to. Entrepreneurs come up with all kinds of excuses not to talk to strangers. In fact, in 9 Mile Labs, one of the accelerators that's a top accelerator on the West Coast in the US, they decided to put in place a process. At 9 Mile Labs, when you went in, they required the entire cohort who were joining for 14 weeks to take the first week and really talk to customers. They worked on how you talk to customer, the kind of questions you ask, and got them all set. Then they took them to the front door and said, go. Don't come back until you have 100 conversations under your belt, and they locked the door. They found that these conversations saved on plenty of overall time. These teams were able to figure out customer needs right at the beginning of this process of acceleration, instead of at the very end like most other accelerators. Next, keep it short. Remember that this conversation is about your customer. It's about them. You don't want to talk as much. You want to listen more. You want to ask questions. You want to be that detective or therapist. Plus, there's been studies that show that the more somebody talks during a conversation, the more they'd like the person they're talking to. If you can get a potential customer to open up and have a great conversation with them, they'll be far more inclined to give you honest answers. Next, dig deep. Find out the truth no matter how difficult. The goal of a customer interview is to really understand what makes your customer tick. So once you ask them to explain a problem or something that sparks their interest, dig deeper to unpack the problem with your customer till you get to the root. As you're having these customer conversations, pause often and try to play back what you heard. I heard you say this, this, and this. Tell me more. I understand this is something that you're talking about. What's underneath it? And if you really understand the way they describe the problem, you'll be able to repeat it back to them in their words, not yours. This is really important because they actually might tell you a better way to describe your own product from a customer point of view than you had thought of before. Next, be your own devil's advocate and try to disprove yourself. Have you ever heard of a pre-mortem? A friend of mine, a special entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, conducts these all the time when he's trying to build something. He gathers his team together and says, we've been thinking about this business, we've been talking a lot about this business. Okay, the business just died. It's dead, it failed. What happened? Wait a minute, we haven't built the business yet. No, let's just assume we built the business and it died. Through this pre-mortem process, he gets to lay out all the things that optimistic entrepreneurs don't deal with. Then he goes out to the customers and he tests his answers. It's a great piece of advice for you too. Test your assumptions now before spending a lot of time and money building a prototype or actual products. Next, pay attention to body language. Most customers make decisions based on emotion. Staying focused on your customer's body language will give you a more accurate insight into the emotional triggers. When someone says, "Oh yes, I'd buy the product," look at their head, look at their eyes. Are you getting consistent feedback? Finally, be empathetic. Don't try to convince them about your product or solution or even the problem they're trying to face. If they don't see the problem the same way that you do, that's okay.